So on day one, being a commissioner, 1984, I assume there's not anything like a marketing and data insights conference. That didn't exist in the mid-'80s, right? You've got to go everything off a gut at that point, I assume.
It was just a question of getting through the day. And I'm serious. People say,
Getting through that first day or every
any
day?
day. The sport was alleged to be drug infested. It was a black sport. People noticed that, quite a grand discovery. And we were in disfavor. I mean, I had been the general counsel from '78 and the executive vice president around '81. But people forget that as late as the '80-'81 season, our games were tape delayed. It wasn't as a business matter. It was as a business matter for CBS because they didn't want to have such a low-rated program. So if you lived on the East Coast and you wanted to see the Lakers beat the 76ers or whichever game it was tape delayed. At 11:30, you could see it again.
So obviously, just like then and now, you guys deal with the broadcasters, your partners, whoever those other partners are. Their data and analytics suggests we want to run our business this way. It's better for us because these are the ratings. These are the teams we want to show. These are the things we want to promote. Your data and analytics running the NBA says, well, we want to promote these other things. We want games on at a different time.
Well, interesting.
We may not agree.
Yeah, you know, the fact is that we didn't have any research. None. I was the 24th employee of the NBA in 1978. By '84, when I became commissioner, we might have been 150. When I stepped down 5 years ago, we were approaching 3,000 in 13 offices around the world. But their research was solid. It showed that Nielsen showed that you wanted. I made the mistake of once saying in answer to who would you like to have in the finals, I said, well, the best matchup would be the Lakers versus the Lakers. Oh my God, you know, oh, terrible. But it was, you know, the Lakers, the Celtics, and then going down in order. And occasionally they might throw us a bone. But they were right. They knew their numbers. But now there's a full department, a research department that makes the arguments that have to be made to which games to show and what would be the likely impact.
How do you give input, though? Right, because we've heard all these stories so far today, bless you, on good kind of data, bad kind of data. How do you make something out of those insights? But at some point, it's a negotiation. It's what you want versus what they want.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the same.
Well, we actually, in a funny kind of a way, you know, they want the best ratings, and so do we, because we want them to pay us more money based upon the ratings. So there's a continuity of interest right there. But I would say that's not the place where the data and insights part of this discussion found us at loggerheads, because they actually had a much more professional research capacity than we did. And it was really, and I used to say something like, we are the most metricized business in the world. You watch our games and you look at Nielsen and see who's watching. You go into our stores and you see who's buying. You check our attendance and you see who's attending. You can check our magazines. You can do all kinds of things to see how business is going. Not that it gave us the insights that you're searching for. That's a whole separate subject having to do with insights. And I think our insights were gained, you know, what is it, like A/B testing? If your insight is gained, the most important insight was Dr. Jerry Buss bought the Lakers, and his insight was that no one is treating the front row seats as the beachfront property that they should be treated as. And so he took a $50 seat and he made it a $200 seat, or something like that. I don't remember exactly. And no one canceled their tickets. So then he raised it to $500, and then he raised it to $1,000. And nowadays, there's one mogul out in California that brags that he has 4 courtside seats and he paid $1 million a piece for them to get someone else to give them to him. He's a little crazy, but that's a separate issue. But really, that's the kind of stuff. And yes, There was Bill Wirtz, who owned the Blackhawks and the Bulls. His view was, and it was a continuous view, that if you put the game on TV locally, you will decrease attendance.
All the blackout rules in different sports.
Right, and that has,
the home he was
that has
talking
largely
about.
been discredited.
Right.
That has now moved to the debate is, do you also stream the game so that those of a certain age, not well represented here, can watch it on their cell phone? I mean, think about that. That's where it really gets to be tough, because you begin planning for a generation that is going to watch your game on the cell phone at a time of 8K, 72-inch screens, Dolby surround sound. It makes no sense to me, but that's where it's going.
But these are the best TVs we've ever made, and yet the data shows people are watching on the 3-inch screen, right? That's where all of a sudden the insight gets a little bit at cross ends.
Well, you know, I'm constantly searching for insights. Have
you found any?
Yeah, I have. Number one, and this is that youngsters of Gen Z, as they are affectionately called, would rather know more about what Zion Williamson was doing in high school, when he was in high school, than sit down and watch an NBA game or the Super Bowl. Whether they have the attention span for it or not, heuristically speaking, they don't care, and they want to do something else. But they knew that Zion, and they know what others are doing. It's kind of interesting.
What about the value in that streaming relationship directly with an audience? So that young person, maybe they want to watch highlights, whatever it is on the phone. They don't want to watch the ESPN game on broadcast, but ESPN's the one paying you guys a lot of money. So how much money is it worth to give up to have that direct streaming relationship?
Somebody is paying, because the big battle was...
But not as much for that stream.
I'm going to stick up for streaming. The big battle used to be, you know, I used to go into a marketing meeting, and the marketing directors were split. We're never going to support the secondary market, StubHub, et cetera. I said, wait a minute. You don't have to support it or not. It's here. You don't have a... We're not going to do that. Don't do it. You know, Rip Van Winkle is also going to work for you when he wakes up. You know, but the truth was that the secondary market flipped everything on its head, because people could buy a full season's worth of tickets and then lay them off on other people who wanted to buy key games. That was exactly the opposite of what the perspective was. Well, if we embrace the secondary market, people could always get to see the game that they see, and they won't buy season tickets, which was an interesting debate, but it turned out to be, you know, not that important, because the secondary market was good for us. And we have, there's so much, I'm almost embarrassed in an insights and data place, which is this conference, to be talking about how trial and error and gut was the motivating directive for 30 years at the end.
But it's a good reminder, right? Because we all know we can all work at our companies and have all the data we want, and then the guy in charge is like, nah, just going to do it the other way.
Well, you know, it's interesting.
Like, if your conference is good and all,
here's
but
the data that here's one data point, okay?
Is it just that I'm at the top of the org chart?
No,
That's the data point?
no, this is the data point. That a walk-on who may be great at college will never play as much, at least initially, as a scholarship player, because the coach is invested in the scholarship player. And if it's the CEO's job or the CEO's choice, it gets treated differently. With all of the data that you could produce, it just doesn't work out that way. I often say, if the owners knew how much it costs them to keep the D League, it was called the D League then, our minor league, in business, they would have fired me a long time ago. But it's now the G League, as in for Gatorade. But now there are 28 teams, and it's thriving as a basketball development arm and as a business development arm. That's because the CEO had made the decision, right, wrong, or indifferent, that this sport was going to need a minor league, and we were going to do it. So the fact that we started with 8 teams in the Southeast, none of which exist, and cost us $40 million, a mere minor point. But now, you know, I remember the slings and arrows. Pat Riley said, I would never use that league. Come on, they own a team now.
They use more than anybody.
Yes, yes, yes. And so it's interesting to watch it. And that is not about the data and insight. That's about the CEO having an instinct and a decision making.
So that's what I want to ask about. When you've got people working for you, as that you said, 150 people when you took over, maybe 3,000 when you left, clearly you had to hire these kind of research types, insights people. They didn't exist when you were in charge. You hired them at some point. But maybe are they too narrowly focused? They don't see
I don't
what
think
you
so.
see?
Actually, the truth is, and in any case, I had an excellent research relationship with the research guys. In fact, one of the secrets
But how
of being...
often did you talk to them? Like once a year?
No,
once a quarter?
stop it. One of the interesting things
Were they on
about...
a different floor so
I'm
they
going to give
couldn't
you
come
a
up to
tip
you?
to be a CEO. You make people think that you understand exactly what they're doing, and then they'll continue doing a good job for you. And I made them think that because I cared, and I would really grill them, say, what do you know? And I would push them on there. And that's a different way of showing that you care, because you're curious about it. And so research became pretty important. And I can't remember the specific decisions. I mean, we now use research. I won't say
You're
we.
Emeritus.
I'll say they.
You're
Yeah,
still part of we.
Yeah. There's an enormous amount of research that's being used, both on the game side and on the business side. We had the biggest hole in knowledge imaginable. We didn't know who was attending our games. Think about that. You know, you sell someone 4 season tickets. He or she gives them to people in the office, kids, whatever, and nobody knows about the usage. Of course, that's now going to be a thing of the past because the move to mobile ticketing is going to have people identified. You know who is going to be checking into your building.
But now we've gone so far the other way. Now we're going to know every single person that came in, exactly what seat they're in, exactly where they moved within the stadium, what concessions they bought.
Right.
Is it almost now so far the other end that you're inundated with too much data?
No. There are 3 or 4 different companies that promote the following capacity. It's called, I guess, driveway to driveway. You open up the app, and it tells you what route to take, because they're watching. Waze is telling you what the route should be. They tell you which parking lot you should park in. They tell you which entrance you should go in through. They tell you how to get to your seat the fastest way. They tell you when the lines at the men's and women's rooms are at their shortest, in case you want to relieve yourself. They allow you to order food. They tell you when the stands, novelties and merchandise go on sale at the end of the 3rd period. And you probably have both their phone numbers and their credit card. The only thing better than that is marijuana sales, where you get their license to boot. Okay, so you get license, credit card. What a business that is. And then you start looking for insights about who your customer was. At one point, with a professor who I said, come on, you think you're so smart, come work with us. I said, I got a great idea. Why don't we take photos of the stands and we'll see who's in them. We'll break it down. Let's take a section and let's watch it every day. And we'll break it down by, that's very crude. We'll break it down by race, gender. We'll make guesses in between, but because we really did want to know who was in our buildings. And now all of the leagues are doing that. And it's going to be very important. I don't poo-poo it. I think it's because you want to sell them more. You want them to buy merchandise. You want them to follow your team. You want them to become subscribers to a publication. You want them to do pay TV and other ways it can be. So the research is very important, and the insights that are being generated now are very important. Who is your customer? That's the most important of them all. And sports leagues have been laboring in darkness, but now they're coming into the light.
What about What does the data say? I know a lot of people on the East Coast here, they're saying, oh, these games, they start at 9 o'clock for the finals.
Right.
And they always say, well, the ratings show that.
What do you think you are, Phil Mushnick?
Right, exactly. But that whole thing, is it just, hey, you know what, that's when most people are watching
That
it. Sorry,
is
East
how you
Coast,
get the
that's what it is.
highest, the highest ratings are between like 11:30 and 11:45.
The highest national ratings
Sorry,
are
kiddies.
our time.
Sorry, kiddies on the East Coast. That's the way we're going to get our highest ratings. Delivering the highest ratings and get paid the most money. And that's just the way it goes. The interesting thing is that the pressure from globalization and the effective globalization of the NBA, and Adam Silver is doing a spectacular job. And I'll just say as an aside, the poor guy worked at the NBA for 20 years in 5 different jobs, and they all reported to me. Some people think it was Dr. King who said free at last. It was actually Commissioner Silver, and he is doing a great job. As we speak, he's in India for exhibition games, the Sacramento Kings against the Indiana Pacers, and then he's heading, I think, to Japan to see 2 teams, Golden State and someone else.
Shanghai just had a game against Houston.
Yes, and then that's right. Well, that was here.
That was here.
We brought the Shanghai Sharks in to be beaten by 70 points by the Houston Rockets. Call them tomato cans, you know, when a boxer would have to beat up on poor other boxers on his way up to the championship. And then there's 2 games in China. So it's, you know, globalization is important. And so what you're going to see this coming season, we've been predicting it for a long time, is scheduling games designed for different audiences. In other words, at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday, the game is being seen at 9 o'clock in, let's say, 6 hours. 9 o'clock in England and 10 o'clock on the continent. And that's going to be a big deal because you have to use the data of your audience. And the best data collection device, one of which I'm very proud, is we have something called League Pass. And if you don't get enough TV from watching the ABC game, the ESPN game, the TNT game, and your regional sports network, have we got a deal for you? You can get 1,000 more games on NBA League Pass, which in my view was always going to be most important globally. So we were going over the top on a global basis at a point when I think I had to call up Jeff Bucas and said, Jeff, you are over the top. We've been doing it with League Pass, which Turner runs for us, for a long time before anyone else had it. And in order for people to sign up any place, they give you their credit card, and you know who's viewing it because you can always see who's viewing it, and you can see who's storing it to watch it in the morning, et cetera. So on the global front, there's going to be a huge amount of data that's gathered in.
What about on the on-court side? We've seen all the data taking over teams with the player tracking, and then it's the research that says just shoot threes and free throws. But on the business side, maybe fans don't want to watch that. So maybe it's good for that team, but maybe people want to see, like you see it in baseball too, like I don't want to see home runs and strikeouts. I don't want to see threes and free throws.
Well, then you got to change the rules, because the reality is that the data says that if you hit 1/3 of your shots and they're 3-point shots, that's better, or the same as hitting half of your shots if they're 2-point shots.
Right.
Or something like that.
Right,
I'm not good
33%
at
from
math.
3 is like 50%
Okay,
from 2. Yeah.
so, but let me just say this. It's pretty funny.
But do you want to watch a game with 83 pointers?
Yes. I love to see James Harden shoot threes. I think it's a joy to behold. But I have people come up to me and I say, don't talk to me, talk to that commissioner. They say to me, I can't watch the game anymore, and anyway, the Knicks got screwed. I said, excuse me, how did that happen? Well, with your stupid new lottery, they didn't get the pick they deserved. I said, oh, the pick they deserve for tanking? Is that what you're suggesting? Oh, you got a problem, bud. And that happened 2 Saturday nights ago with the DoubleTree Inn in Mahwah,
But that's another example.
No, but that's
another example of where, for the teams, hey, we're following the rules the data says to tank, but for a business, you guys don't want to see
No,
that.
and in fact, they changed the lottery so that tanking would not be a reward, and it isn't a reward anymore, and that's what you do. You sort of have to, it's a continuing experiment that's live. It really is. But here's the deal. I knew if you have a coach step up here and sit and say, well, it's really about your gut, who to put in, that guy's on his way out. Because it's not about the gut. It's about the analytics. And that's the best place to figure it out. You know, we now have data that says if LeBron gets the ball in this spot, he shoots 60%, and in this spot, he shoots 30%. There's a company called Second Spectrum. There's another company that I'm an advisor to that literally, based upon a sensor, in a ball, in a uniform, and on the ceiling, on the roof of the building, not the ceiling, is sub-second latency, tells you exactly what's happening. It follows the ball. And then, by a series of algorithms, it tells you, if you're a coach and you want to know, that if you touch the ball 3 times on offense, you're 28% more likely to score than if you just dribble it up and shoot it. And that's a very important insight to a coach. And I now learned what the XYZ axes are. I don't know exactly, but they are. One has to do with jumping, and the other 2 have to do with
Z. The Z's
the Z. That's right. I said, tell me again what the Z is. But there are very interesting issues raised by that, because I picture the 1984 world. That dates me. George Orwell, that there's a coach in the locker room. He's watching all of the devices. He's got a headset on, and he's communicating with a coach on the bench. And he says, listen, here's the deal. Player X, he's not hydrated. His blood pressure is very high. His heartbeat is even higher. His lactic acid has congealed, and we can demonstrate it. And facial recognition says that he'd rather be any place than there. So why don't you take him out of the goddamn game? And that's what's coming. And you could understand, if you're a player or a player's agent, why there might be an argument over that data.
Data that they don't necessarily see, they don't control, they don't know how it came up.
Even if they see it, and even if they, control is a different issue,
Right.
But that's a subject of negotiation and collective bargaining. Because if I'm a player who's about to have a heart attack, I want to sign my long-term contract first.
Right.
And my agent sure wants me to do that. So because he gets 10% no matter what, or whatever, 3%. We cut agents back to 3 or 4%. But it's a really important issue. It sort of speaks of we're not necessarily HIPAA compliant, speaking to the docs in the audience, and it's an interesting issue that has yet to be resolved, and I think it's a fair issue. But there's so much else happening. I'm involved with one company that you're not going to believe this, because I didn't believe it. You jump up and down on a force plate, and they can assess the risk that you have for injury. And it's true. I hereby aver that it's true. And they determined
jump
that.
on it?
I would hurt myself if I jumped on it. I have 2 new knees and a new hip, so I'm not jumping on anything. I'm happy to stand up with a tennis racket in my hand. And my wife says, you're not even playing tennis. Well, the pro hits it back to me. That's pretty good. But think about that. And the important insight there is they have 1 million other data points to compare that to. So you have the ability to determine that risk. And the CEO of this company says, and the NBA players are so intense that if they knew they were at risk for a certain injury, if they did a certain thing, they would build their game around other aspects. If Klay Thompson knew that he was at risk for an ACL injury, he's such a competitor and so intense that he might jump off another foot, he might run a certain way. You can correct this thing. So you want to be able to talk about the risk risk avoidance and repair. Because my goal through my sort of recent portfolio investing is, imagine if we could extend the career of every player for a year. How much would that be worth to the player and to the league and to the teams in the league? So that player health is a huge issue, and the data, and that's why we like to stay away from, I have a colleague that works with me, we like to talk about analytics because that gets you away from health issues. And the analytics tells the story. And the story is you're better off taking layups or three-point shots. The Wall Street Journal had an article about a high school team in Minnesota. Those were the rules. Now, you could change values. You could have a 4-point shot. You could eliminate you can do all kinds of things. And as Ken said, didn't used to have a 24-second clock. So you can do all kinds of things if you want to change them. So data is going to become, in some ways, we could make the argument that you don't need coaches anymore.
Oh, there we go. Put that down. And
by the way,
everyone tweet that out when
if
you leave.
On your cell phone you're a fan,
it's going to turn into a video game.
And your cell phone tells you, your device tells you, that the coach, based upon the first half, the coach has the wrong team in on the second half. It's very easy to do. There's an algorithm.
Sub out different players.
There's an algorithm that does it. It's ridiculous, but it says, okay, this is the effective team. None of them is fouled out, but the coach is elected to follow his gut and put this other team in. And the fans are going to get that in real time. The coaches are really going to love this, right? Because it's and one of our companies, Shot Tracker, actually got a waiver from the enlightened NCAA to allow coaches in a certain conference to have their iPad on the bench. So the
I think it starts this season, Mountain
Western
West.
Athletic Conference.
Mountain West or WAC, one of those two.
One of those.
One of those ones out in Idaho.
You never heard of, okay? They have a waiver, together with maybe the Big 12, to have it on the bench. And it's amazing because now the coaches can look at it at halftime or at the quarter break, but it's very insightful. It tells them exactly what's happening in the very game that they're coaching. And that's going to be the future. It's going to be, it's crazy. And coaching is still going to be important, motivational, control, and things like that. But statistics and data are going to control the game. And if you don't like it, then you should put your tickets on StubHub.
Well, that was great. Commissioner Stern, appreciate it. They're giving me the wrap-up sign, so that's all the time we have.
No questions? Come on, give me your best shot. That Steve Jaffee became a deacon?
No.
Oh, okay.
The one after that, there was on the other page, a lady, Joanna Cohen, wrote, she was a former writer for Sports Illustrated, and she said she had a 10-year-old daughter who loved baseball. She went to 32 games this year, but they're doing the playoffs at 8 o'clock at night on the West Coast, whatever, and she couldn't, after support of all year, couldn't watch the game. So apropos, you mentioned before, the ratings were obviously off the charts at 10 o'clock at night. What do you do for the young kids who want to watch the games?
You try to reach them another way. You try to give them the data and the data points that they want. It's videos, things that excite them, because it's rare that they're going to watch a game. I was on a panel last week with the president of Sinclair Broadcasting, which owns the regional sports networks, including Yes, has an interest in Yes, and Joel Littner, the president of Yes, was bragging that there are only 3 million people who go into Yankee Stadium. He has 5 million unique individuals that watch it on TV, and they watch some horrendous number of minutes. I said, that's easy. Your games take 4 hours. You multiply them by minutes, that's too much. And he said, you're right, we want it to be 2.5 hours. So I don't know. I think the reality is we're giving up on those kids if their parents won't let them stay up. Or they can get up in the morning and watch highlights on NBA TV, which we get paid for by cable systems who subscribe to NBA TV. Or they can, I was going to say VCR, but that tells you how old I am. You could DVR the games and have them at the crack of dawn, they can begin watching. So it's not a great issue because it's not an audience we're chasing. In the old days, and I'll say this and then you can wrap up. Here's an insight. In the old days, when we started marketing, think about that. We were interviewing agencies in the 80s. Oh yeah, we think we should do some marketing. And their insights, which I'll carry with me forever, is that you should not try to get people to change what they view. You should not ask people who are not interested in your sport to watch your sport. You're not going to succeed at that. What you should do is ask the people who do watch your sport to watch an additional game or watch longer, because that shows up in the Nielsen ratings. I think that's being upended by the prospect of sports betting. I think that now sports betting is going to get people to watch longer, because if they're placing what the British call in-game bets and what Las Vegas calls proposition bets, they'll hang around with their cell phones tuned and they'll make a bet along the way, and that's going to enhance betting on the game. And some people who would like to bet a little something, who wouldn't normally watch the game, are going to tune in, throwing the premise of what I just said to the winds. And so that's going to be great, and for sports. So if you think that franchises at $2 billion are too high, you should rush to get in while there's still such a bargain, because when you throw in the sponsorship dollars that are going to come from the MGMs and the Caesars and the William Hills and the Paddy Power Betfairs, et cetera, it's looking very good for sports. And with that pitch, I'll shut up.
Does that sound good, Ken? All right, thank you. Thank you, appreciate it.